From the moment that you land, you see Christ the Redeemer at the top of the Corcovado, 700 meters above the city. Breathtaking.
The team just gelled. It feels amazing. Like, this is the reason you compete. You get in what we call flow state, where you're not even having to talk to the guy next to you and they know exactly what you're thinking. And
is that the best performance we've ever seen on a Sunday by any team?
Yes.
Yep.
Simple.
Wow.
Yes.
Hello and welcome back to the Foil Podcast, episode 15. It's our weekly chance for Freddie, Carr and Andy Rice to discuss all things sail racing. I'm Neil Cole. Thanks for joining us. Now, whether you're listening or watching, we appreciate your company and we like your comments and questions. So whatever platform you're on, get in touch. Let us know your thoughts across all of our socials. The handle is We Are The Foil. And of course, the website is thefoil.com. Please join in the discussion and we will, I promise, get to some of your questions and comments later on in the show. Freddie, where are you right now?
I am in Valencia. I'm down in Valencia. I'm probably about a kilometre away from the famous America's Cup bases from 07 and 10. And, well, on the back of that, probably about a kilometre and a half from where they're going to be racing a SailGP event in Spain in September. Been out sailing today with Jolt, a TP52, a member of the team that won the Admirals Cup for the Monaco Yacht Club last year in the very successful rebirth of the Admirals Cup. And we're training for the Sardinia Cup, which is coming up in July this year, which is the Mediterranean version of the Admirals Cup. So this is a TP52, which you all know I'm a massive fan of. But this isn't a Super Series TP52. This is an IRC 52. So we're talking twin rudders. We're talking water ballast. We're talking furling sails, because we have to go and do some offshore and some coastal racing. So I've been blasting around on that for the last 3 days, which has been so much fun and a privilege to join this team for this year.
Lovely. And Andy, you're just back from Rio?
That's right. Got back 24 hours ago. Pretty long trip, changeover via Rome. Sort of good to be back, but really sad to leave Rio. I went to Rio with a little bit of trepidation because I've been there 5 or 6 times before. I didn't know what Rio I was going to find this time. You don't know if you're going to come back with everything that you left with. You do need to be a bit on your guard. But actually, I felt like most of those nerves were misplaced. And it was just so exciting to be there. From the moment that you land and you get in the taxi towards the city and you see Christ the Redeemer at the top of the Corcovado, 700 meters above the city, breathtaking, and Sugarloaf Mountain, well, both something to cherish and also, I'm sure, very much cursed by the sailors on that race course as well. It was such an influence on the race course, but going up to Sugarloaf and looking down on the race course, just scoping out what we might have seen from up there, it's just an absolutely breathtaking city. It's super exciting. Copacabana Beach, Ipanema, and SailGP gives you that extra excuse to go there. Let's hope that it keeps on going.
Because... Are you getting paid by the tourist board, Andy? What's going on here? Are you getting a backhander, mate? Like, you sound like a Jet2 holiday advert. What are you going on about? I love it. But, mate, you look, to be honest, I know you've been on a nice holiday, but you do genuinely look shot to bits. So
much, Freddie.
Give us. I mean, I could tell you're a massive fan of the place. I've never been myself. Neil, I know you love it as well. Give us the vibe. Like, did it work as a SailGP venue for you?
Yes and no. I mean, there are so many positives. It is absolutely beautiful. I think that Sunday was the redemption for the event because I saw the practice racing on Friday. That was pretty dire and not much wind. Saturday, you saw that for yourself. And Sunday, the breeze came up. They were still on the big rigs. We'll talk about that. That made it very challenging. But from a spectacle point of view, I thought Sunday showed us what Rio can deliver. But on that race course, underneath Sugarloaf Mountain, you are putting yourself at risk of making the event more difficult for yourself than maybe it needs to be. But again, we can come back to the detail of that in a moment. But just being in Rio, even if SailGP didn't work, if you haven't been to Rio before, there is enough to distract you from that fact.
Right. I'm
So
convinced you are on a commission here. You're on a commission. Just chill out with your Rio plug, would you?
As long as you had a caipirinha or two and some churrascaria meats, then we'll be happy.
Freddie, you wear your musto much better than you wear your jealousy. You've just got to get yourself down to Rio and
Mate,
and then
I had FOMO. I had genuine FOMO. Like, been to the first three events of the year and absolutely loved them. Sydney, the racing wasn't great, but like, yeah, I couldn't stop watching it as a fan. It was a beauty, and I didn't get to watch the racing live because I was out sailing, but obviously caught up with your reviews from down there, which put me straight in the loop, and then rewatched the racing on YouTube and gathered my thoughts on what I thought were the make or break things over the weekend.
Very good. What you're suffering from there, Freddie, is what they call in Spain envidia sana, which is a sort of healthy envy of what Andy. And yes, of course, all of your great interviews and reports are available on our YouTube channel and on thefoil.com. Thank you for that, Andy. So yeah, let's do some quick headlines. Basically, you're just back from Rio de Janeiro, event 4 of season 6 of SailGP, the NL Rio Sail Grand Prix, the long-awaited arrival of the championship in South America, and specifically Brazil. 10 years since Guanabara Bay was the field of play for the Olympics. Headline news: Australia win the 17th finals victory in the league's history, clean sweep on Sunday, and utterly put behind them the suboptimal weekend at home in Sydney. But there's plenty more to unpack. So I guess the thing to start with is day one, because it was, you know, as you said, day two was Christ the Redeemer, because day one was tricky conditions.
I loved day one.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Go on, Freddie, because you hated that stuff in Sydney. You couldn't stop telling us how boring it was in Sydney.
Yeah, but it wasn't. Do you know why I loved day one? Because the course was different. It felt like the course was different, obviously, because we're in Rio and you love Rio, Andy. We get it. But I loved I just looked straight away. I looked at the overhead shot of the race course. I saw the shortest start line from top to bottom I have ever seen. And I genuinely was watching I was like, how are 12 boats going to fit onto that bit and launch onto the race course? There was a 300-meter sprint to Mark 1. And when you got to Mark 1, you were on ley line for a jibe and a left turn at the bottom. So it instantly got me thinking differently to how I normally think in a SailGP race. Because how do you approach that start? Because it's so short, there's going to be less room to launch onto the line if you're a late attacker. You're all going to get to Mark 1 relatively together. The dirty wind off the 27.5 meter wings is huge. If you get there in first place, it's very high risk to do a jibe set or an early jibe at Mark 1 and go back through that dirt. The lead boat gets away with it. And then I love the jeopardy and the fact that if you had a shocker, like we saw with the Germans, I think in race 2 or 3, if my memory lets me down, they got there last and they jibed at Mark 1 and ended up third. So it was a very different looking race course where sometimes I think in a 10-knot breeze with a standard SailGP race course, it can be a little bit formulaic. So I was there for day one.
Yeah, fair enough. I thought, well, I've still found every day interesting. I can nerd out on any of these days. And there was always opportunity for gain. Of course, the starts are always important. The other thing that stood out to me, and I think I spotted Sweden doing this move more than most, but that jibe set that you talked about, yes, normally very risky, but the early jibe onto port seemed to work more often than not. And I thought that was a pretty strong move. And I thought sailing stadium side of the course generally was the slightly stronger move.
Right. Yeah, and it was interesting, wasn't it? Like you start at the bottom of the line on a 300-meter reach into Mark 1. The likelihood is you've really got to hold in there to get that inside lane to be able to do it. And then the overspill of boats coming from the top of the line where you can't jibe, and then they get to boundary and they all have to jibe back into their dirt. And the majority of them fall off the foil and then get into this reacceleration race to go into the bottom gate. I just thought it was a different look, and it distinguished itself away from Sydney because there was just 1 or 2 knots more wind. I thought it was it was interesting racing, and I also enjoyed that no one cracked the formula on that day with four different winners from the day. The first two race winners coming from Sweden, who did a late charge at the line, and then Spain, who did a late charge at the line, and then the second two winners coming from the group that came with the Schnigel closer to the line and a superb trigger pull. So, as always, starting was absolutely key in this light stuff.
Yeah, so one of the things that I saw time and again on that Saturday, and I don't remember seeing it so much before, is the ability of a boat on foils to fly straight through to leeward of another boat in H2, flat to the water, and seemingly take no notice of any bad air from that rig, just be able to carry their momentum through on their own apparent wind. And that was a really strong move. And actually sometimes it was doing the carrying on a little bit further before going into the jibe. And that was a really extraordinary part of Saturday.
I didn't see a strategy that consistently worked, but I wind it back to the start. There was one thing that stood to me was the boats that finished the day in the top three. Now, it was very close at the end of day one from first down to seventh. There was only 7 points, but the boats that finished in the top three, I believe, were Australia, the USA, and Sweden. And they were the only boats that didn't really change their style of starting throughout the day. So Artemis did late charges throughout the day. That's how they won race one. And the Australians and particularly the USA were executing kind of close to the line trigger pulls very well. And if I was to give an MVP or a boat of the day for day one, although they didn't top the leaderboard, how the USA was starting, and it was mentioned in commentary, they over the four races, they were 3-3, 5-2 at Mark 1 in a variable race course, but how they executed their starts, they kind of deserved a better position overall overnight at the end of day one for what I thought was some of the best starting I've seen in that condition.
Well, Freddie, they were still second at the end of day one, and you and I called them as our prediction for winning in Rio, and I thought maybe we would be on for something there, and that actually that prediction would come true.
Even a blind squirrel can find a nut, mate.
Maybe that's our best call of the whole season, but and it still wasn't right. But Freddie, what do you put that down to? That consistency of starting with USA?
Yeah, we talked about it in our preview pod. I think Taylor does a very good job with 30 seconds to go, and even on a tiny line, to give himself just a bit more gap off his leeward boat. His rotation down to the line, the timing of that is superb. And then they're getting their boat in the right spot when the trigger on the right angle in the final 3 seconds down to the line, and accelerate well. So they've got good things going on. Do they accelerate well because they've got Anna grinding in number 4 on the Saturday when they're 4 up, and she is always trimming that jib. So they haven't just chucked a female athlete up there to survive the day because they've gone down to 4 for the day. She's a jib trimmer. So you've got to think that her coordination with the wing trimmer is the best in the fleet when you go down to 4, I would suggest. And the other thing that comes onto my radar is just how many H2 starts Taylor does in the M32 compared to any other afterguard out there in SailGP.
Okay. And you do how many M32 starts yourself, Freddie, and what do you observe from doing those?
Yeah, so over the course, an M32 is 32-foot catamaran that doesn't foil but goes very fast. But what I could see on that Saturday, it was an M32 trigger pull exercise. Now, Taylor sails as a tactician on board Surge, the M32 World Champions from 2025. And the style of starting for an M32 out in Miami or Newport or wherever it may be is a short start line with a very short reach to Mark 1. And I looked at that course and I thought, this is an M32 setup here. And it's all about the trickle into the line, building the gap off the boat to leeward, choosing your rotation point, and accelerating well. Now, at an M32 weekend, we have 18 to 20 races over the 3 days. We have 2 days of practice racing where we probably chuck another, let's say 12 starts in there. And then you do your own trigger pulls to practice. So over a 4-day period, you can do 40 to 50 trigger pulls in exactly that same style on an M32. And he is the only afterguard member. Phil Robertson was at the Worlds, but Taylor is the only afterguard member who's a regular feature on that M32 season. And I'm putting that down to why in Sydney and day one here in Rio, he's had the best starting in the fleet, because he does it 40 times when no one else is doing it.
Are you saying then that this is as close as we've got to Formula 2, the thing that you need to be doing the most of when you're not in an F50?
Yeah, I don't know about that, but if I was, we all know the problem with SailGP is, for the athletes and the sponsors, it's the same for everyone, is lack of training time. So if I was a CEO or a sailing manager of a SailGP team, we know that a lot of the sailors are involved in the America's Cup. That's upwind starts in foiling monohulls. Potentially not that relevant. I'd be looking around and going, right, starts are so important. 50% of the starts this year with the venues that we're going to could very well be H2 or H1 starts, all about that rotation. How do I get the reps in to do that, to get my team flying up the leaderboard? And that's what they're doing. A good chunk of that American group are involved in M32 racing. And like I said, I think they do 40 trigger pulls on that style of starting, where a lot of the other teams don't do one until they arrive at the next SailGP event. So, yeah, practice makes perfect.
Brilliant. Well, let's hear from two members of the United States SailGP team, Anna Weiss and Taylor Canfield, about their starts, and also, about the ups and downs of the number of crew members on board.
And USA starting really well. What do you feel is the key to your starts at the moment?
Yeah, I think the team has been working really hard behind the scenes just to focus on our trigger time and our rotation off the start line. And, Taylor is putting us in a really good spot and positioning us well in strong positions. And I think, there's been a lot of improvement there. So it's really exciting.
And if you could characterize it today, what was your primary or main way of wanting to start? To windward or to leeward or somewhere out the middle?
Yeah, I feel like it was different each start depending on the pressure. That was a pretty key factor in terms of like positioning wise and also wind shifts. But again, like Taylor did an awesome job getting us off the line, and it was a very, very tricky transitional day and a lot of opportunity out there. And it was nice to come away with a consistent scoreline.
Every time the crew drops down to, say, 4 like we had today, do you feel like, yes, this is in my warehouse, this is an Anna Weiss kind of day?
I really like sailing 4 up. I think it's really fun, and I feel really empowered on the handles. And it's nice to stay consistent in my role across all breeze conditions. So in terms of confidence, not too much changes. It's just, we're able to expand the bandwidth a little bit more with that consistency.
Anna, thanks very much. Good luck tomorrow. Taylor, tell us about today. I don't know if you've seen the results. What are your feelings about the day?
Oh, a wild race course. A lot of ups and downs pressure-wise and shifts all over the road. So haven't seen the results yet, but feel like we had a pretty solid day and sailed the boat quite well.
How do you feel about being second? Going into that Mark 1 final race, you against Australia. Australia get away. You get swallowed up and you're back in 5th or 6th as Canada goes to leeward on the foils. What does that tell us about that race course, and what could you do about that?
Yeah, it's definitely frustrating at times, but, coming into a bad moment, I think it's important to just sail your boat in the breeze you have and try to make the next good decision. And I think we salvaged a lot of boats because of that. So, it's heartbreaking watching boats foil on either side of you and when there's nothing you can really do. But, maybe we could have had a better jibe there, but, we ended up a little bit wide at Mark 1, and I'm not sure if we could have crossed Denmark in the jibe. So, definitely a moment I would like back.
A lot of today must have been about knowing when to go for H2 or H1 or go for the full foiling. So what was the philosophy on that?
Yeah, I mean, our goal on a day like today is sailing clean lanes and kind of go with what you see. And, we've done a pretty good job with that in Sydney and the practice day yesterday. So, we just trust our gut and trust what we see on the water and choose the mode accordingly. And, again, I don't think you can be upset when other boats are doing other things all the way across the race course because sometimes there's just nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, and so Anna makes a really interesting point, and we spent the last year wondering whether a female grinder is the way to go, but Anna saying the consistency of her role through the wind range allows that consistency of the way that they operate and communicate the boat. Whereas the Spanish, for example, Joan Cardona, one of their grinders, he's the tactician as well. So he gets dropped off the Spanish boat and then they have to rework the comms, which actually doesn't seem to be working too badly for Spain. But the broader point is that when you drop from your normal 6 down to 5 or 4 or 3, how much do you have to reconfigure the comms and how well organized are you to do that? And the US stays a little bit more consistent in that regard.
Real shame the way things started for Martina Grail and the Brazil team, and it was kind of beyond their control. What was it? What was the vibe like on the ground, and how did kind of geographical factors maybe affect that? And kind of they started badly when they really needed momentum to start the weekend.
Yeah, well, they started badly in that they didn't start the first 2 races, but actually when they did eventually start races, they still started badly. So when we're just on the topic of comms and things like that, and I think there's a feeling that Brazil need to resolve the comms about who's calling the lead into the start. I don't think they've quite got their comms sorted. That's what I'm hearing from the Brazilian team. And if we had more access to the audio off the boats, we could find out for ourselves. But that's the vibe that I'm getting. But coming back to what you said, Neil, I was sitting in the stands with all the Brazilians and they were so excited and they did this build up and here come the Brazilians, and it was all pre-scripted. And meanwhile, I'd already heard through my Brazilian spies that there was a modem problem and that hadn't been conveyed to the stadium. And so we all cheered the fleet off the line in start 1, but there were no Brazilians to cheer. But you know what? The Brazilians didn't actually seem to care. And some of the Brazilians thought the Australian boat was maybe the Brazilian boat because that sort of green and gold look. They confused the Australian boat, and the Australian boat was doing quite well.
Just quietly, flags are a giveaway.
They are, but you know what? I guess we shouldn't be saying this on our nerdy podcast, Freddie, but you've seen this for yourself. People aren't always paying attention to the racing that much. I mean, there's a lot of dancing, there's a lot of samba, there's a lot of noise in the stadium, and people aren't always paying that much attention to what's going on with the racing. And I was getting all kinds of distraction in front of me, which is quite difficult not to look at. I was trying to focus on the racing for the purposes.
I want to hear more about that.
Hey, Ricey, you're digging, mate. You're digging. Just stop right there.
I know I should stop right there.
Stop.
But
Stop.
what my broader point is that even though Brazil didn't do that well in the racing, and actually their 5 points consolation for the 2 races they missed due to the faulty modem were probably above their finishing positions when they were finishing races. But what amazed me was, unlike, for example, if the Brits were watching in Portsmouth, I think there would have been general disgruntlement and people would have started to leave, just like they leave. I'm sure
mate,
Freddie's.
We do disgruntled really well, don't we? Really well,
especially at Arsenal. Yeah. No, the Brazilians are just so patriotic. They were prepared to forgive their team not doing particularly great. And Martine was amazingly relaxed. I thought all the pressure of such an event would get to her. Did it have an effect on the way she sailed? I'm not really sure, but she really seemed to be enjoying herself, and she was so proud to be showcasing her city to the rest of the world. And so I think if they come back with a better performance next year, assuming that we come back to Rio next year, and Freddie, I hope you join me so you can just shut up and just enjoy it with me. It would be so good. And there are other elements that we can talk about racecourse management that I think would make it much better next year. So we're nearly at the end of day one, aren't we, lads? But we also, GBR were not having a great day on Saturday, but at least they had Sunday to make up for that. So there was another opportunity for our season leaders and our current champions to come back on Sunday, but they weren't looking great at the end of Saturday.
Well, we'll leave it as a bit of a cliffhanger there and take this moment to get a little word from our sponsors, and then we'll be right back.
This episode of the Foil Podcast is brought to you by Musto. One thing we talk a lot about on this podcast is performance, not just the boats, but the systems and the equipment behind them. And honestly, when it comes to sailing kit, Musto has been setting that standard for decades. They were the first sailing brand to work with Gore-Tex, building gear alongside sailors, pushing the boats themselves to the absolute limit. Because performance isn't claimed, it's learned through real experience. You see that today with their partnership with Emirates GBR SailGP, where everything operates on the edge of speed and precision. We've actually been wearing Musto's Evo collection ourselves whilst travelling recording the show. It's sailing-born performance gear you can actually live in, on and off the water. Head to musto.com to check it out.
Okay, you left us on a cliffhanger there, Andy. So we come back to day two, where everything should go like clockwork for Emirates GBR. There's a bit more wind, but that's not quite how it panned out, is it?
No, there was a bit more wind. It was a chance for a reset for Dylan Fletcher. They've been so strong for so long. So they come out of race 5 and they end up last. And it marginally improves in the next two, in race 6 and 7, because they get 2 10th places and they earn a point each from each of those. So from a total of 30 points up for grabs, and we'll talk about the team that managed to do that in a moment, but only 2 points out of 30 across those 3 races, those 3 fleet races for GBR. And if there's any consolation for everybody else, I've had this conversation with a few other teams, is that this shows where SailGP is at. If the form setters, the highest performers of the last season and the beginning of this season can have that kind of shocker, what does it tell you? Because there are no donkeys left in this fleet right now.
No, it was interesting to watch, wasn't it? They set themselves incredibly high standards, and they've earned themselves with a 1-2-2 start to this season, and an incredible run of podiums at the end of last season. They've earned themselves a bad result. I thought a bad result for a team like an Australia or a Great Britain or a France or a Spain or a USA could be something sort of 7th. And that would be, I did not see them coming away with no points. But I really quite enjoyed Stu Bithel's comms. At one point, it was halfway through day 2. It clearly wasn't going to go their way. I think they were. I think they'd got a penalty, hadn't they, in the start of race 6, and had to slow down. And Stu, at some point during that race, he was like, "Let's just get all the bad luck and crap for season 6 out the way now." And I thought that's spot on in a moment where everybody would be really effed off with how the weekend is going. He goes, "Let's acknowledge this. This is not our weekend. Let's just get all of the crap out the way now." And you could see with the British, they were trying to find a way to get that boat off the line. You look at the Sunday, one of the starts, they were early coming in from the committee boat end. Then the next start, they were early coming in from the bottom end, and another start, they were in the pack. They didn't find a starting consistency that suited them. Whereas, as I said, on day 1, the top 3 boats didn't change any 4 of their starting styles. But when it's not working, you're scrambling, aren't you, and looking for answers. And the first place to do is to try and get a launch off the line. But yes, it was a shocker for them, wasn't it? But they've earned the right to score no points, and they're still 2nd overall. But they will be having to look at that light air performance, and particularly that light air starting.
Yeah, and it was weird for the whole fleet, with the exception of one boat that we'll talk an awful lot about, with being given the 27.5 metre rig in those conditions. And clearly the wind kicked up on Guanabara Bay more than SailGP predicted, because they wouldn't have sent them out with those rigs if they had seen that coming. And we've seen a variety of, well, actually, I was going to say a variety of reactions to using the rig in those conditions. I'd say no one was really enjoying it. But only the Australians talked about flow state. Everyone else was talking about making the best of a bad job. And Nathan Outridge, well, as he often does with our conversations in the mix zone, grabbed the opportunity to send a message to SailGP and said, can we just get rid of these 27.5 meter rigs altogether? There's never any time when we should ever use them. Whereas others were saying, no, they've still got their value in a definite H2, H1 kind of day where foiling is probably not going to happen, and it just helps you to get from H2 to H1 a little bit earlier on those non-foiling days, partly because it's a heavy rig, and once you start leading the boat over, the weight of the rig sort of helps you to maintain that H1 status. But if you are marginal foiling or foiling quite a bit like they were on the Sunday, it's a heavier rig, and they only allow 5 on the boat, not 6, because of potential structural overload. And apparently the alarms were pinging off here, there and everywhere on the boats of the boat's about to break. And luckily no one's boat did break, but the stress alarms were going off on those F50s on the Sunday.
We've had a few comments from you guys watching and listening. Not the real Chicken Joe said, do the RC also want to use the bigger wings because it keeps the fleet tighter, lower top speed, higher low end speed, earlier, longer foiling, doesn't pull the fleet apart as much? Maybe it's actually something they'll have to accept to get any proper racing in these conditions. It was quite snakes and ladders anyways. One more from Flaffle 2198. Can we just get rid of the wings once and for all and go with a normal mainsail, maybe twin skin, that can be changed on the water when conditions are changing? Surely it will also make logistics and maintenance a lot easier. So thoughts on those two comments now that we're on to the elephant in the room, which is, was it on the wrong technical setup?
Was it on the wrong technical setup? It was on a very tricky technical setup, wasn't it? And there was only one boat that mastered that. And as we keep saying, we will talk about it. A double min skinned mainsail, trust me, from the America's Cup is a lot of faff as well. It is percentages, tens of percentages less efficient than a wing. It is a lot of hassle. There's a lot of workup. There's a lot of hydraulics in the top of those and in the bottom of those, with hydraulic outhauls and Cunninghams and all this kind of stuff. And the reality is it is less efficient than a wing. So in a world where we're going to venues and we're often trying to attach the wing as efficiently as we can onto the wind as efficiently as we can onto these wings and get them up and ripping, I think a double skin mainsail isn't the answer for these boats. The wings do work. They are the most efficient way of powering a sailboat.
Yeah, but very difficult to make a call on when the tech team have got to put, when we got a complete fleet, 13 of these rigs, they've got to change those rigs overnight. So I think it's an interesting point that they raise. But going back to what Nathan Outridge said, he said that he'd rather that they stayed on that standard 24 meter wing, even if it was in lighter winds. Yeah, he's very sure about that. I'm not sure that the rest of the fleet is feeling quite as strong about that as the Swedish skipper.
We saw your interview with Nathan out on, and if you haven't seen it, have a look on thefoil.com and on the YouTube channel for the Nathan's response to Andy's question about the wing, because he was quite happy to talk about it.
It was the decision to go to the high-speed rudders. I don't know why that is. Is it a writing moment thing? And with the high-speed rudders, with a slightly uprange forecast on the bigger wings, I believe they sail without differential. So where the leeward rudder is lifting and the windward rudder is sucking down to give you more writing moment, I think they weren't allowed to sail with rudder differential on that Saturday. And it made it very pitch unstable in a swelly sea condition. And reading some of the quotes that Nathan said, it's with the big jib as well, that when a gust hit, you'd just see the forestay disappear as the jib powered up. You'd get a massive amount of lee helm, and then you'd sort of dump the jib, try and balance it up, and you'd kind of get a huge amount of weather helm. And he said, and this is a man who's done a lot of F50 sailing, and previously before that, the AC50, this is the worst that he's ever felt the boat balanced in his life. It was a real tricky beast to try and tame. I thought that was a very interesting comment from a very experienced 50-foot catamaran sailor.
And yet so different from the other Australian skipper, Tom Slingsby, who talked about being in flow state and talked beautifully about how each of the guys on that team were interacting with each other and able to extract the best performance out of that boat. So very different approaches and reactions to using that rig.
Yeah.
Well, let's have a quick listen to Diego Bottin, who talks about the swell and the managing the maneuvers in that wind, and then we'll get to Australia because that's the thing we really need to talk about. So here's Diego.
Diego, you don't look very happy. What's the feeling?
Yeah, obviously we are happy with the result, and yeah, at the same time, very hard conditions here, and obviously there was a team today that was over the rest, no? So yeah, big congrats to the Australians because they super deserve it today, and yeah, I mean, super result for the team, but we need to look up to these guys and try to catch up.
You're making a lot of these finals, but you're not managing to see it through in a final. What needs to change?
Yeah. Like it's been like until this season, it's been kind of the opposite. We've been like converting a lot of finals, and now we are struggling a bit in the finals. And yeah, we need to analyze, see what has. I think it's just an approach thing, and also little details here and there that we need to find out and address.
27.5 meter in overpowered conditions. Are we seeing another challenge that maybe some of the teams haven't really had a lot of opportunity to practice?
100%. Was the first day we had these conditions on these big sails. It's true that in the warm-up was way stronger than then in racing. Then in racing we were kind of top end but in range. And yeah, I only can say that it was super hard. You need to be very careful.
So how does that change the dynamic? Who's having to work harder than normal? I mean, presumably the main sheet trimmer, the wing trim is pushing the rope away, hardly pulling the rope on.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, with such a strong winds, the biggest challenge is to do the maneuvers, especially the veraways and the roundups. You really need to get the speed, no? And we had no wind at the top mark, so we really needed to build speed to be able to bear away. Otherwise, you got hit by a puff and it was easy to tip over, no? And yeah, getting the balance on the boat, it was quite critical today. Also with the swell, there was a massive swell, no? And made things way harder.
We don't see the swell from the stadium, so what difference is that making?
This makes a huge difference, especially for the flight controllers and also for the boat, no? You are suddenly going down the swell at a huge speed and then stopping when it goes up, so timing the maneuvers relative to the swell and all this stuff is super important.
So Spain couldn't do it, but consistently getting close to it. But the team that really delivered is Australia, the Bonds Flying Roos. And, from me, who's been following this since the beginning, is that the best performance we've ever seen on a Sunday by any team?
Yes.
Yep.
Simple.
Wow.
Yes. That was ridiculously good. They started close to the line all day on Saturday, and if you listen to their onboard after the finish of race 3, they have a conversation around, are we starting too close to the line? Right, this doesn't feel great, we're not getting the boat going. And then lo and behold, in start 4 they're also in that early trickle back to the line. But they obviously reviewed that comment overnight, and they joined the late starting crew, the Chargers, with boat speed and a little bit more breeze, and they just nailed it for the 3 fleet races. Well, they nailed the Swiss in one of them, let's be honest. But then most importantly, the final. Now, I knew they were on for the day. Obviously, that first start was incredible, but listening to Ian Jensen, their first lap of their first race, for any young sailor, listen to Ian Jensen, and he was the dominant voice on that boat. He's the wing trimmer, and he just completely talks the trim state around that first lap. And on that first lap of race 1, which they were leading, they completely locked the boat in. And for the rest of the day, they didn't really have to have that conversation. They found how they were going to work as a trim group and a pilot group. But that first lap from Jensen driving the boat and talking about how much wing sheet pressure he's got, talking to Sam Newton about the kind of burps in and out on the jib traveller, And the other thing they were doing on the first upwind of race number 5, so the first race on Saturday, they were the only boat going upwind with windward roll, and they'd had the rudder differential taking off, so you haven't got that windward hole sucking down, and that just goes to show how dialed in Jensen it was with his wing control, that he could lock that windward roll in, and that just is free speed. So we like giving our kind of little sailor of the day or man of the match or woman of the match at events, but for a young sailor, listen to Jensen go round in that race, race number 5 on Sunday, and you can see why they won all 3 races.
It was also, as you just alluded to, Freddie, coming in from the back with speed is a high-risk strategy. And wow, what a start in the first race of Sunday, race 5. Just
and the second one, Andy, talk us through the second one.
Well, that didn't go quite so well for them, did it? They ran out of room, and Switzerland had already booked their spot, and I couldn't really see it from where I was in the stadium. But yeah, I mean that highlighted the risks of doing that. And the funny thing is that Tom Slingsby told me that that was the best day he's ever sailed. He reckons it's the best day that he's ever sailed in SailGP, but it was also the day when he says he hit another boat in SailGP for the first time, which is also quite an incredible record. That was the day where he actually touched another boat, and that was Switzerland. Now, he got a fairly severe penalty for it, but nothing like what the French got for it, who got black flag. And there we have, you know, it's win big, lose big, that starting approach.
The start of race 6, as you're talking about, where he had his first ever touch in SailGP, he got given the penalty, as did the Brits, both for, I think, clear ahead, clear astern, and the Brits, I think, with a windward leeward. Tommy was kind of at the top of the stack, and it was one of the better executed penalties I've ever seen. He had to go behind penalty on the Swiss. So he put the bow up, he gauged up off the Swiss, and bearing in mind all the boats to leeward of him are foiling, he got the boat on the foil and took the transom of the Swiss at pace, and the same with Artemis, who were the boat underneath them, and laid Mark 1 and went from kind of H1 and off the H1 off the foil with a penalty to 5th, and on the inside of the stack, having shaved the transom of 2 boats like that. And it was one of the more impressive collective boat handling things I've seen on an F50 to shake a penalty. And it took him from probably what was saying above his wing as 8th or 9th with a P next to it, to 5th with an inside line for a jibe and a lay down to a left turn at the bottom, and it led to a race win. That penalty was probably play of the day.
That's amazing, isn't it? Having just touched another boat and sort of broken your record for 6 years of not doing that, to then take it so close to get back into contention like that. So not even fazed by having that touch and still to be able to sail. We don't see anyone else, certainly not this weekend, sailing at that level.
Shall we have a listen to Tom Slingsby telling you all about that, Andy, and then we'll come back and carry on?
Tom, to win 4 races in a day, well, to do that anywhere is impressive. Could you ever imagine that any team, let alone yourselves, could do that here on that race course?
Yeah, I don't think it's been done before. We've won 3 races in a day back in season 1 when there was only 6 boats or something like that. But to do it against sort of 12 in a 12-boat fleet on such a challenging day, if you asked me today, would you take? Were you going to get 4 first? I'd say not a chance. But I think we would have taken 4 5th places today. But yeah, the team just gelled. It feels amazing. Like, this is the reason you compete, is to when everything comes together and everyone's gelling, you get in what we call flow state, where you're not even having to talk to the guy next to you and they know exactly what you're thinking. And it just felt like we're in that today. And yeah, we just couldn't sort of put a foot wrong other than hitting another boat. We hit the Swiss team, which is the first time we've touched another boat in SailGP history. So our streak of 6 years has come to an end. But we fortunately sailed so well that the penalty points didn't matter to us and we're still able to make the final.
That's amazing. Okay, so some interesting stats there. Now, I haven't heard anyone else say flow state in relation to using this 27-metre rig. People are saying it's the boat's all over the place. Nathan Outridge never wants to use this rig again. How do you find flow state with this difficult rig in those conditions?
Yeah, I mean, we had the wrong setup today. There's no mistakes about it. The 24-meter wing would have been the choice, but it's tough. You get a wind forecast and you've got to make a call, and the SailGP make the call, and then the wind picks up in the forecast overnight. It's an error, but at least we were able to get exciting racing today and everyone foiling. At least it wasn't the other way where we went to a smaller rig and there was no wind and no one foiled because of that. So
we can't see how difficult it is from the outside, but you're saying flow state, but meanwhile the wing trimmer's pushing the rope, it's loose, there's hardly any pull in the wing. And so how do you balance that between all of you? It must be really difficult to coordinate.
Yeah, very difficult with the 27-meter wing up range. I mean, we were just overpowered all day, and you see Goobs trying to depower the wing and easing. It's just a slack wing sheet. But we spoke a lot about it, said, look, today if the wing comes in, we're going to be overpowered. Sam on the jib sheet, he's going to have to help Goobs out. So Sam was, every time the wing sheet went slack, Goobs said, we're slack, and Sam eased the jib, and then he would get tension back in the wing. So the way those guys were working together, and also with Jason flying the boat, like he knew how to sort of get power back in the boat. He's raking back extra to sort of roll the boat into windward to get the load back in the sheet. They just did such an amazing job of that today. It was really impressive to see how well everyone gelled.
He handled on day one that penalty against the Swiss when they were lapping the Swiss. He didn't handle that with a huge amount of grace. And you know, we don't necessarily get to see what these penalties are for, which is, I guess, a conversation for another time. But it just kept getting better after that for the Aussies. Talk us through the next two races before we get to the final.
Well, there was that photo finish in race 6 between Australia and Germany, and Australia leading quite comfortably but falling off the foils on the last downwind before the short reached the finish. Germany catching them up, and Germany closing in on Australia. And then who's coming upwind? Who would you imagine coming upwind so far behind? Is none other than season leaders, Great Britain. And they almost get themselves in the way, and Tom Slingsby and Tash Bryant just can barely look. They all they want to do. I mean, Tom Slingsby told me he didn't care if they finished second to the Germans. They just wanted to get across the line without a collision. As it turned out, it was a photo finish, 0 seconds between them, and Australia just sneaked the win ahead of Germany. But wow, that was very, very close indeed to something quite bad.
And I enjoyed race 7. Race 7, we obviously had a bit of jeopardy. It looked like Australia and Artemis were going to make the final 3, and there was a battle, wasn't there, between the USA, who we know were starting fantastic well all weekend, and sailed through the fleet a bit in race 6 to keep themselves in contention, and Los Gallos, the Spanish. Now, this is where the common theme that we saw throughout the race course for that Sunday kind of came into play, where everybody wanted to get to the top left-hand corner of the upwind. Now, this provided a little bit of an unusual play. Now, we often talk about Mark 1 being busy and then big decisions at the first leeward gate. But what we saw in Rio on this Sunday was, because everybody wanted to go and hit this top left corner of the race course, it meant that the majority of the teams were coming in on port ley line and looking for a left-hand turn to come back to where they came from. So there was a lot of traffic coming from there. There was a lot of rule incidents going that way. I believe Craig Mitchell was getting record number of penalty presses. Now, in race 7, at the bottom mark, the Spanish, Los Gallos, were deep, and the Americans were in pretty good shape. And it was really in the balance who was going to take that final spot. And in that moment, the Spanish had a very good upwind, staying out of phase with the rest of the fleet, and critically choosing to do a right turn on that first upwind gate, where the Americans were involved with the pack, going left turn at the top. And that was the swing that let Los Gallos get into that final. The other thing that I noticed in race 7, and this was much like Ian Jensen's cool, calm and collected lap 1 of the first race on Sunday, was they'd just gone round the final mark for the finish. They were about to collect another 10 points, making it 30 overall for the day out of 30. An incredible achievement on such a tricky race course. And they went to do the last jibe, and Jensen said, board button's not working. So the wing trimmer drops the board with a board press, a foot button press. And in a split second, Tash just goes, no problem, my board. She dropped the board. She kind of landed on the new jibe. And the comms in a moment where you're doing, call it 30 knots going downwind under Sugarloaf Mountain, jibing into a finish of a SailGP race, not to have any panic. It just showed a team that was in complete synergy and a really impressive way to finish that fleet race series from the Australians.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. Just coming back to how jammed it was, how much traffic there was going out towards Niteroi, i.e. away from the stadium. I do not understand why you bother having 2 windward marks on a course when you've got pretty much the whole fleet, most of the time, all going around one mark, and they're just not using the other mark. And you've got remote controlled GPS located marks. You can move these marks anytime you want. And if, as a race officer, you see one mark not being used, why not move it further downwind and make it more tempting? Because we sitting in the stadium had very few boats going past us. So not just from a tactical point of view to make the race more interesting for the sailors and the TV viewers, but we weren't getting a lot of action passing in front of us in front of the stadium either.
I like that, Ricey. I really like that. So there's an obvious mark that you want to go round and the other mark's redundant. Just bring the bias towards the unfavoured mark because of pressure and try and tempt some boats into that way. I like that, mate. Hey, that's your first good idea of the season.
This is not my idea. So that was my idea, Freddie. The next idea, hearing from some of the locals, including one of Brazilian's famous multi-Olympic medalists, was that they wished that they had moved the whole course further away from Sugarloaf Mountain, closer towards Santo Dumont Airport, which is incredibly close. And one of the reasons why they were restricted to only one helicopter for the weekend and not the usual 2. And the other helicopter was actually permanently strapped to the side of Sugarloaf Mountain. And I got an interview with cameraman Adam Brown, which we will feature on the foil at some point. But this is the other thing that we need to bear in mind, is when you speak to some of the people behind the scene involved in the broadcast, and you think, especially on the Saturday, we hardly knew that we were in Rio with some of those camera angles, and that there was a dissatisfaction with the way that the show was presented on Saturday, never mind how bad the wind was. But there are just so many other factors in these events that you don't really know until you speak to everyone behind the scenes. But one of the feedbacks I think that will carry into Rio next year, because you and I, Freddie, going there, and maybe you as well, Neil, because I know how much you love Rio. We're going to move it further towards the airport, and I hope that doesn't have too many repercussions, but move it further away from Sugarloaf, because if you'd move the whole course about 200 or 300 meters further to the left as you look at it from the stadium, that could have made the world of difference. So those are the kind of things you don't know maybe until you've seen it go around once in a new venue.
Okay, and so we get to the final. Let's have a quick summary of what, was it all over straight away? Tell us about the final.
No, it wasn't all over straight away. It was interesting starting, wasn't it? Artemis led back very early, trying to get out of phase from the other 2 boats, trying to stay free for their own trigger pull. They had to do a good amount of weaving, ducking and diving, coming back to the start. And with 5 seconds to go, Artemis were bow down and needed one more big wind up to hit the line perfectly. The Australians were already driving at 100% boat speed to the midline, and the Spanish were late, and that's how they arrived at Mark 1, wasn't it? The Australians had a very good start, 100% polars. Artemis had to wind up on the gun and had a wobble on their land for that angle, and the Spanish were late. They got to the leeward mark. You could hear the comms off Slingsby trying to justify going to the left mark, and he kept it simple, didn't he? He said, look, there's no real bias here, but I see better pressure that way, and it will set us up well for top left. And the Spanish split the other way. They did a right turn at the bottom, and Artemis had a fantastic leeward mark rounding, didn't they? They kind of hipped up inside the Australians, managed to step up the boundary more, and this is where the race closed down, wasn't it? They kind of wound up inside the Australians and did a tack underneath them for the last tack of the upwind, where, for all intents and purposes, Artemis were kind of looking like they could win their first ever SailGP event. But that tack, I don't know what happened, whether they tacked in light airs or they struggled with the land of the boat, and they fell off the foil. And at that precise moment in time, go back into the Australian boat and you can hear Jensen, funnily enough, talking to Sam Newton about his wing sheet load and what he needs to do with the drib. And they were driving. At that moment when Artemis were having a wobble, the Australians were on fire over the top of them. 30 seconds after that, Artemis had a penalty incident with the Spanish. They got involved with each other and it was race over from that point. But for the first lap of the race, all bets were off. It was a close one, but it was the Australians' calmness and ability to kind of work the sails and the foils together at the moment that Artemis had a wobble that decided the final.
Yeah, beautifully described. And you can see that Artemis are very, very close to the level of the Australians. But in those marginal moments, the tiny details are still going in favour of the team that has sailed together a lot longer, apart from Ian Jensen, of course, who has only just stepped on board. But generally as a unit, they are running a little bit tighter than Artemis, who are still learning as they go, even though they've got a great bunch of individuals on board who are also obviously doing a lot of sailing together with Emirates Team New Zealand, which can't be hurting. But just those tiny details in the end made the difference. And for Spain, they keep on getting into the finals and this season, and they're not quite able to see it through, and they didn't really deserve to with the start that they gave themselves. But that's a nice problem to have. You look at that compared with what the British suffered and what a lot of the middle order suffered. You'd still happily be the Spanish with the kind of problems that the Spanish have, because they're doing absolutely fine.
Absolutely. Come out of that race weekend with a top 5 and you are, thank you very much. Let's get out of Rio with that wacky racing. Wacky, but enjoyable racing. Yeah.
Yeah. And you also said that, okay, USA, they didn't make the final. They just missed out. They finished 4th. But in some ways, that was one of their best weekends. They continue to mark themselves out as real championship contenders. I keep on waiting for their luck to run out. And clearly it's not about luck. This is a new level of skill that we've said it many times, but we didn't think we'd be talking about them the way that we are, looking at the way they were in 2025.
So we've got 3 weeks just over 3 weeks until Bermuda. So like quick summary, you've already put it, both of you immediately answered that it was the best Sunday performance ever by any team ever in the history of the league. But any other quickly points arising before we move on to other business, really?
Yeah, I mean, they were going to be on the 27.5 meter wings all weekend. So that meant my mates, the Grinders Union, the G1s, the big legends, the actual heartbeat of the sport, the greatest guys and girls in the sport, they didn't get to go on board all weekend, which is super sad, but it is the nature of the beast. But the caveat to that, Kinley Fowler, G1 on board Australia, has been with them from day one. We all know, and we talk about the prize money in SailGP. The prize money is split amongst the sailors that race over that weekend. So the Australians will win $400,000 for that race weekend. It seems a bit crass to me talking about money, but that is the sport that we are in, and it's great that we have this amount of money within sailing. And that is going to get split amongst the 5 sailors that race over the weekend. And my poor mate Kinley Fowler won't see a penny of it. And I have written a column on thefoil.com this weekend where that came out today, that talks about kind of America's Cup setup and how that might change with the not salary cap, but the budget cap that is now within place in the America's Cup, and compare it to other sports and what's that has done to other sports. Talked about this fantastic world of SailGP, where with a good season, you can times your annual salary by 6, something like that, But this year in SailGP, there is pretty strict guidelines around how that prize money is split. So do go and check that column out. And Kinley, I will buy you a beer when I see you in Portsmouth later this year, mate.
It sounds like he needs the money, Freddie. And I mean, this is something that we're going to be coming back to, because it seems to be lacking a sense of natural justice about it. But there may well be good reasons, and we'll be digging further in the foil into the reasons why. There may be stuff that we just don't understand, but from the outside, it looks a little bit odd that that money is paid directly into the bank accounts of those individual sailors that were on board the boat. What you do with money after that, I understand they sign a contract that say they're not going to share it out, but in the end, you could share it out. Whether that happens or not, I imagine varies from team to team.
Yeah, and I believe some of the teams have their own internal bonus system and all of that. I go into all of that, but it is a bone of contention. But the underlying factor is the fact that there is big prize money within SailGP can put successful athletes on par with a tennis player that is ranked like 20th in the world, or a golfer that is ranked 30th in the world, or an NFL center or kind of left tackle. You know, that's the magic of SailGP. With a successful campaign, they are getting up there with the top athlete earners in the world, and that's where we want sailing to be. We're not going to die wondering what sailing could be if we didn't have this fantastic sports league. But some of the grinders and some of the sailors that don't get to share out that prize money, it must be pretty hard, a bittersweet weekend for them.
And so they will be looking forward at the rest of the season, and those grinders in particular, wondering when they're going to get a go, because you look at the end of the season, finishing with Geneva, Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and the Kinley Fowlers in this fleet were going to be thinking, well, that's me done. I might as well just put my feet up for the end of the season, because they're not going to need me on board for a standard weekend in Geneva, Dubai or Abu Dhabi. But then, of course, the world has blown up since then. The Middle East conflict goes on, and it's having a massive effect on all of our lives, and it leaves big questions over how the end of this season is going to play out in SailGP, and where will the finals take place. And that's the big chat around the boat park at the moment. Some of the things that I'm...
Go on. I feel like you might have heard a few rumours.
Well, as things stand, you could say, well, you know, we would have to close off the season in Geneva, because we can't go to Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and there's rumours of another.
We want more regattas.
So what do you do? We do. So Cadiz has lost out this year to Valencia, but Cadiz would still dearly love to host an event. I'm hearing rumours of Cadiz might be brought into the mix. I'm hearing Pensacola, that's been brought up. So that would be logistically maybe fairly straightforward, and ties in quite well with the announcement this season of Pensacola, Florida being the new training base for SailGP. That could be relatively straightforward. But how about this? Why not go to Perth? Just go straight from Geneva, or straight from Europe, straight to Perth. Yeah, me too, Freddie. I agree. We love Perth. So you could have the end of this season in Perth, and you could have an amazing finale in Perth, and then everyone goes home for Christmas and New Year. You leave all the boats there, you leave all the containers there, and you come back and you kick off the beginning of 2027 season in Perth. And we're all having to cut our cloth according to the way that the world is being redefined by Trump and Netanyahu and Iran and all the rest of that. And so these are the big discussions that are having to take place. And I'm hearing that some of these hard calls are going to need to be made within maybe the next month, and probably not too far beyond.
Wow. Well, obviously, we hope that all of the conflict is resolved and we do finish the season where it is scheduled to be finished. But good to get an update, because these things need to be thought about. But yeah, let's hope for peace, and that everything stays as it is.
Beyond SailGP, we've got things building up for the second big multi-class Olympic regatta. Semaine Olympique Française takes place in Hyères in the south of France. That's going to be super exciting next week. So that's going to be going on there, and some of our SailGP competitors will be straight back into that world, having competed in Rio. And then just taken place over the same period as SailGP in Rio was the Wing 4 European Championships, with about 100 competitors competing in Naples. And that's a world that I've been very close to over the last number of years. But something has changed, because Julien Ritotti, one of the top French riders, but not quite the top, had an amazing week in the men's division. And Mathis Guillot, who is the multiple world champion across many, many years, had an absolutely awful event, didn't even finish in the top 10. And the 16-year-old Vina Picot from France won the women's division, and she relegated Maddalena Spanu, the Italian world champion in the women's, further down the order. So I suspect that is about new technology coming in. They've got double skin wings that are still being developed. So that is a bit of a sort of a technology arms race in Naples, a bit like another technology arms race that we'll be talking about in Naples.
Very good. Well, Freddie, enjoy your time in Valencia and all of your sailing activities. Andy, I hope your come down from Rio isn't too hard. And to everyone else watching,
you like Rio? You never really said whether you like Rio. Do you like Rio?
I'm not going to tell you, because I don't want anyone else to go there. I want to keep it to myself. So I'm going to keep my thoughts about Rio strictly to myself.
Well, I'm just still trying to visualize what it is you were talking about that was obscuring your view of the boats on the bay. I've got a pretty good idea.
Behave, lad.
Well done. Thank you very much, fellas. And thank you very much for watching and listening. We do appreciate your company and all of your comments. We read them. And as you'll see, we do respond when we can, and we read them out on here and address them when we can. We'll be back next week for podcast episode 16. But in the meantime, keep across everything using the handle We Are The Foil. And of course, read stuff read by and presented by these fellas at thefoil.com. Thank you for being there.